Welcome back to another episode of Junkin' with Junior, folks. Got a little project today, not one that I'm excited about at all. In fact, I'm a little disappointed in this one, but whatever. Gotta fix it. It ain't no good the way it is. It's only gonna get worse and self-destruct itself, so we have to fix it. Got my wife's 2017 Jeep Wrangler JK here with 83,000 miles on it, and the water pump has a drip out of it already. You gotta be kidding me. Come on, Jeep. You can't come up with a water pump that's gonna last any longer than that. I had one on my other truck last to 200-some thousand miles. I just don't understand why one would go out this quick when it's always taken care of. The antifreeze is spotless in it, and it's not abused. It's not like it's had mud packed up in the pulley. It's been buried in a mud hole. Nothing like that. This is an asphalt pounder. It's not abused at all. But as luck would have it, we've got a bad water pump on our hands, and we've got to get it fixed. So let's get into this project and see what we're in for. So generally, I'm pretty weird and picky about a lot of parts that I get for daily driver vehicles. I like OE replacement parts, especially on my GM stuff. I'm just a real fan of, you know, certain components. Some stuff I think aftermarket is better, but certain things I got to stick with factory on it. But on this one, with this factory water pump only lasting 83,000 miles, I am not putting another one of those back on it. I'm going to take my chances with a good old Gates product. I do have a lot of faith in their entire product line, so we're going to go with the new Gates water pump. It comes with a gasket. We're going to go ahead and replace the belt while we're at it. The hoses appear to be in really good condition, so I don't see a need to replace those, although it is kind of wise to change them as preventative maintenance, but they just look really good. There's zero signs of wear and tear on them, so I don't see the sense in that. And we're going to go with a Dorman OE Solutions replacement thermostat housing / water neck with the thermostat built into it. It's one of those things that's the old school stuff in me. I have to change this while I'm doing the water pump. They just go hand in hand. Yes, it's old school, I know it, but you know what, if we change it now, we don't have to worry about it again. And hopefully this is a better product than even the one that Jeep makes. I don't know, we're gonna find out, but preventative maintenance, it's gonna get that as well. So let's get started on this project. We're gonna get started with the obvious stuff. Let's get this engine cover out of the way. Next, we need to get this air intake tube out of here. It's got this long muffler style system on the bottom of it. It's going to be directly in the way of all that. So once we get some of this plastic garbage out of the way, we'll have a lot more elbow room to get down in here and do our job. Another thing I was observing is we're going to get this coolant catch can reservoir out of the way. It might be all right, but it would just make the job a lot easier to get it the heck out of the way. One thing I've learned is when you're doing this kind of stuff, if there's something like that that's, you know, doesn't have to be removed, but it's going to make your job easier, just take the couple of extra minutes and get that stuff out of your way. It's going to save you a lot of frustration, and then you don't have to worry about breaking stuff as well, bumping into it, you know, as this plastic gets fragile and such. Sensor on here we got to unplug. There we go. I assume that's an air temp sensor they got in there. That's what it looks like to me. Okay, so now we are staring at our thermostat housing water neck right here. That's going to be pretty easy to get to. Right underneath the throttle body here, just a couple screws holding that in. And like I say, let's get this housing out of here. No sense in fighting it. I'm not a fan. It's got one little, those quick release plastic button jobs, if it's going to be an easy one to get out, who knows. My luck, they're never easy. Even when you have the right pliers, you still can't get the right angle on some of this stuff. There we go. Smashed it a little bit, but it's reusable. Lift this out of here. Just like so. All right. So now we can get you right that in here so you can see what we've got to do. Not too bad. We're staring at the water pump here. We're gonna have to take the belt off. We'll unload that tensioner. That doesn't look like it's going to be fun to put the belt back on. It's a pretty interesting routing situation on here, but the water pump looks to be pretty straightforward once we get the belt out of the way, get these hoses off, and we'll be cruising. So here's another little thing that I like to do. Conveniently, the new water pump gasket comes in a nice piece of cardboard to keep it protected, but we're going to put this piece of cardboard to use. There's not a sticker on here with a belt diagram, and sure, we could go online and look one up and find that, but why use the internet if we don't have to? Let's just draw a diagram here. So we're going to start with the crankshaft down at the bottom, and our belt comes underneath there, and then the belt comes up over the water pump. Put a WP there so we know exactly what that is. There's no confusion. And then it's going to come around the AC, loops over the top, and then it comes over here to an idler. It's going to go underneath there, then comes all the way straight up, makes a hump there, got a small round pulley there. That's going to be our alternator. Then we've got another idler right here. It's going to go under that. Then it comes over here around our power steering pump, so we're just going to put a PS. Then we've got another one right in between, which is going to be our tensioner. Comes up over that one and down here. So just draw a line of that one and put TEN for tensioner. So there's your simple diagram right there. It only takes a couple seconds to do this stuff, and it makes your job so much easier. You always got to wrestle with these factory clamps a little bit. If you didn't, it just wouldn't feel right. And yes, they do make proper tools for this, but guess what? I don't own the proper tool. So when in doubt, some channel locks will bail you out. I'm telling you, you can make it happen with some of these things. Real lifesaver. There she goes. Of course, we're making a huge mess. It's just the way it goes. Alright, let's see if we can get this lower clamp and cut some more fluid loose. So close. Oh, there she goes. Of course, this one, can we get it off by hand? Nope, it is screwdriver time. Now, I'm not using a ginormous screwdriver that's going to damage the hose. I'm going to use this little one that actually has the tip rolled up on it a little bit from being misused in the past. And we're just going to try to go in this groove here on the pump. We're just going to slide it down in there, because once you break that seal, the coolant will get all around there, and then it generally will lubricate that entire coupler there and allow it to slide off a lot better. Let's try it. It's moving, but not quite all the way. Just go around it a little bit. Okay. Man, was I wrong on that theory. Usually works that way when you get that hose in there and pry it, break it loose, but this is a stubborn one. There it goes. Okay, we're there. It is a really strong belt tensioner. This is a long pry bar I've got here. Man, you've got to get on it. Just gonna pop it off the water pump here, and we are free. Just like that. It takes a decent amount of leverage. That's about a, I don't know, 2.5 foot pry bar. Now the belt's off there, we can get it pulled out of everything else, get our water pump changed, and keep moving forward. Alright, so one thing when you don't really know what you're getting in for, I like to take the new pump and kind of eyeball it and see where these bolts are going to be roughly versus all the junk that we have going on down here, to figure out where the bolts are going to be to what we have to take off to get to those bolts. So this is one of the situations that it looks like it's going to be 10 times easier if we get this alternator and this lower bracket for it out of the way. So we got a couple of bolts with some looks like 15 millimeter heads I grabbed. Nope, that's going to be a 17 and a few 13 millimeters. So let's get that alternator bracket out of the way. All right, so that gets our alternator completely out of the way. Now we can also see that these tensioners are real tight in here, so it's going to be a good idea when we put this back together to have this belt looped up here to go around the alternator. That will make the process much easier than trying to fight it. And we can also see these two bolt holes right here that are pass-through holes for that bracket we just put on. That is these holes right here in the water pump. So yes, all that stuff did have to come off to get to it. Let's get these two tensioners out of the way here, and here they are, 13 millimeter. There we go. Okay. Break them loose. Cheat a little bit. Speed up this process if we can. Maybe. There we go. There's one. This is another one of those things that always makes me a little leery, is as hard as all this stuff is to get to, these bearings here, they still feel decent considering. I don't know. I think while I've got this stuff apart, I'm gonna pick up 2 new of these wheels tomorrow from the parts store. I can actually kind of hear and feel it a little bit. I'm not gonna chance it. While we're this far, we're gonna spend the extra few bucks on these tensioners and grab some new ones, and then we know when we put this thing back together that I don't have to take it all apart in another 20,000 miles for some crappy over-engineered part that Jeep had put on there. It's a good time to feel this tensioner as well. Tensioner feels good. Feels much better than the idlers actually, which is weird because they usually have the same style bearing in them, but it feels good. So we're going to leave well enough alone and leave that one there. If we ever need to change that one in the future though, we don't have to take the alternator off. That one has just a couple bolts holding on the front here, so we can get that off without having to tear apart all sorts of extra stuff. So I'm not scared of that one like I am those other two. It's just too easy to change them while it's there. Get our thermostat housing off of there and grab a 10 millimeter socket. This thermostat housing, it's just another one of those things. It's all made out of plastic, and I just have to wonder why. I mean, it's easy to say that, oh, it's quicker and cheaper, you know, for the companies that manufacture that stuff and get it down the assembly line. Like, I kind of understand all that stuff, but why do we have to use so much plastic on our new vehicles? It's just doesn't seem to make sense to me. But who am I, you know? These engineers get paid a lot of money to figure this sort of stuff out. Well, there she is, and here's the old O-ring, which is actually stuck on the aluminum better than it was the plastic. Comes right off though, no debris left behind, no gasket sealing, anything like that. There's a little bit of texture to it, so we'll you know, scrape that off lightly. We'll try it with our fingernail or a plastic scraper just to make sure that that new one is going to have a good seal when we go back on, and one less thing to worry about. I'm gonna zip that here and out of our way. These upper ones right here look like they're the water pump, but they're actually for this upper thermostat housing manifold type deal. So don't mess with those. You don't need to. You don't want to develop an extra leak. Another thing that's helpful too, when you do have the new pump laying here, I didn't do it with all of them. I wasn't really paying attention at first, but I noticed there are some different length bolts. So you can take those old bolts out, and as you take them out, you can lay them directly in the new pump so you know they're going to be in the right spot when it goes back together. Just one of those little things to make your life a little bit easier, hopefully. There it is. Of course, drop the bolt that I didn't want to drop down in the coolant. But there's our pump, gasket. So the water pump sits like this in the Jeep, and you can see right in there, there's all that orange residue. In fact, you can even kind of see the trail a little bit where that coolant has been running down, where a seal's failed inside that pump. So what a shame, but it is what it is. We're halfway there. Let's get this dude put back together and back on the road. So I've actually got the 1/4 inch driver here, just the hand driver. Gonna run down all these bolts and just get them snug, because I do believe in a torque wrench on these small bolts. They're very easy to over tighten and snap them right off in that block, and we do not want to go down that road. So we're gonna do it the right way, the smart way, snug them all down by hand. Then we'll come back and put a torque wrench on them, and I'll have to look up what the actual inch-pound settings are in the instructions that come with the water pump. So we've got our torque wrench set to 105 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds. That is 105 inch-pounds, 1/4 inch drive torque wrench. And we're gonna make our way around this water pump, checking all the bolts in it, torquing them like they should be. We're gonna go in kind of a crisscross pattern, because there's not a regular design, if you will, that you can go by. It's such a odd shaped water pump. There's our first click right there. Come across to this one and keep going until we get them all done. And then I always like to double check them all just to make sure before we move on to the next step. There's a solid click. Let's go right here. And it does feel so good to use the torque wrench, because waiting on your elbow to click can sometimes not be the right thing to do, and it's easy to lose track of stuff. The torque wrench will never let you down. Don't have to worry about over tightening and snapping them when you're going by the manufacturer's specs. There it is. Hiding down here at the bottom. There we go. Now I'm just going to go back all around and check them, just in case. Make sure we don't miss any of them. I'm just going to go around in the pattern of following the edge of all the bolts, so I know I don't skip any that way. And so far they're all feeling. There's one I missed. That's exactly why you do this. So I got our surface cleaned up. There's still a little bit of like a black ring from where that old O-ring was, but I'm not too concerned about it. It's nice and smooth now. I don't feel anything sticking up, so it doesn't scare me at all. And get these bolts started, and we can torque those as well. And this thermostat housing also has a little bleeder on top, so whenever we get ready to fill it, we'll have to crack that loose to let a potential air pocket out of this neck. because the neck actually angles down for the radiator hose to hook to it. There's a little bit of downward angle here, not a lot, just enough. So when we crack this loose, that's going to let any air pocket that's trapped up in here just go right out the top, and then the system can go ahead and bleed itself out the rest of the way, and that will be good to go. So get those snug, and torque wrench time again. Get them pulled up there even. And same thing, wait for that torque wrench to click on the 105 there, and we are good. It's a nice solid feel. So we can get this hose back on here and let it quit dripping. Take our handy dandy pliers, get that clamp back on. And when you're reusing these spring clamps, I'm kind of weird about it. I always like to put them right back where they were. You can play around with them a little bit. You can see that white mark there and there, and also the indentation where the clamp actually was riding. Doesn't matter. It's just one of those things that I think it's cool to put it right back where it belongs. So we've got our genuine Mopar idler pulleys here. Two of them. Remember the other ones were a little rough. These ones feel so much better. Really looking forward to the peace of mind knowing that these are on there and good and new. Crazy thing is though, I could not find Gates idlers anywhere. I'm a huge fan of the Gates stuff. Nobody has them. Had to get these from the dealer. The dealer didn't even have them. They had to order them in from Mopar, so delayed the whole project a little bit, but we're gonna have brand new parts on this thing. Let's get them installed and get this Jeep finished. All right, let's get this tension in here. That one's idler, excuse me. That one sneaks in behind the tensioner bracket there. Not a lot of room to get it in there. It's nice and snug. 13 millimeters, snug them up. The bolts are pretty cool. They have a nice little taper underneath the head, so they're kind of a self-centering deal. It lifts the idler up and centers it on that bearing race nicely. Nice and snug. One more. This one's got the long bolt but goes right up next to the thermostat housing here. This bolt goes all the way through the pump and into the block, so holds the idler and the water pump on. Now, I think we're ready to put this hose back on and we can route our belt up under there, because remember that alternator is going to sit right up here and the pulley faces towards the back, so it's going to be much easier to route the belt through that hole to the power steering pump over here before we have all that stuff in the way, and we'll kind of just let it loosely hang there and hopefully everything stays in place while we get this all lined up. Our belt's routed back in there loosely. You can see the alternator is gonna, sit in here, and the pulley's gonna go right in here where my thumb's at. But one of the tricky things is when you're dealing with these tensioners, it's always harder to get the belt to go over a pulley with grooves, like the power steering balancer alternator or the AC. So I've always found it's a little bit easier to take it off of a smooth pulley like this water pump one here is what we're going to use, because then when I unload the tensioner, I can actually take and just slip it up on here and slide it and kind of push it instead of having to get it to lock into each groove. So sometimes that does make life a little bit easier. Okay, alternator is tight. Now we can get this belt routed on here, pull that tensioner over, and hopefully install this belt. Okay, now just gonna get our pry bar out of here. It's out. So by, like I say, having the belt on all the pulley grooves, it makes it so much easier just to take that belt and roll it up on here because it's a tight fit. I almost forgot. Got this clamp here for the heater hose coming off of the water pump. Gotta put this handy dandy clamp back on here. Maybe. Get our incorrect pliers at the right angle in here. Makes the job achievable. Here's a tight one. There it goes. So before our intake tube goes back on from the air cleaner housing to the throttle body, we're going to go ahead and fill this radiator up with coolant, make sure we don't have any obvious leaks from all our hose connections. And whenever we get the radiator topped off, remember we have to crack this bleed screw loose here because the air pocket will get trapped inside of this thermostat housing water neck area because of the downward angle. So we'll crack that till we get a little bit of fluid out of there, then we know the air's out. We can top off the fluid again, put our tube on, fluid bottle, the reservoir, and then we'll be able to crank it. Now underneath the throttle body, I have no idea what type of screwdriver they expect you to use to break this loose. So it is a tight situation, but the head's tall enough, you can actually break it loose with a pair of pliers. Just be gentle when you are tightening it back up. I've already got it finger loose, so we're just gonna crack it loose and see if we get some air out of it and then some coolant. Air, and there's the coolant. Not a lot, but just a little bit, and that's all it takes for these things to get airlocked and the coolant doesn't flow through them at all. So we will dry all that off, make sure that's tight with a pair of pliers, and I'm going to wipe all this off the differential as well where it dripped, because when I fire this thing back up, if I see that, I'll be in panic mode thinking that I did something wrong. Now we don't have to worry about that. So we got our coolant reservoir. It just has these little like tabs that go into these holes, and then it slides down and locks into place. So they actually did make that relatively easy, surprisingly. Something that the manufacturer decided to make easy. Well, maybe I spoke too soon. There she goes. Stick our hose over here so we don't make a mess, because if that falls down we will have a mess. It's got the little push pin deal to hold it into the radiator fan housing there. Just goes into that little plastic tab that it has, so it's not, you know, gravity's on its side, it's going to hold it in place, but some cheap insurance right there. Get this up out of the way. Now we can put our intake tube in. It's got this long, like, I don't know, some kind of a drain deal, I guess, if you needed it, but it probably makes everything quieter too. Don't forget to plug this, what I think is a temp sensor, back in before you get it all the way down in there, or that won't be a fun job at all. A nice little snap so we know it's engaged. And we're going to put it on the airbox first is the plan, because that doesn't have a very flexible neck like this side does. That gives you a little more wiggle room. And before we tighten those clamps, let's go ahead and get these started in the core support so that we know everything's lined up. 10mm socket on those. Snug them down. They are a metal nut, but they're encased in the plastic housing there, so don't over tighten. You don't need a wrench at all. This will get you plenty tight enough. Just like that. And this hose snaps right in there so it stays out of the way and doesn't kink. Then you can switch over to our 5/16. Tighten this hose clamp on the throttle body. Snug and on the airbox. All right, so that all looks good. Let's top off our coolant a little bit, and then we can crank it, start get some temperature in it, get that water, coolant circulating. Let it build up some heat, which will also build up some pressure. Show us if we have any leaks anywhere. Dripped a little bit. It's a lie. Let's break in this water pump. Just got back from our test drive. Don't see any coolant leaks underneath the Jeep, so I guess we did something right, or we got lucky. I'm not sure. Well, that's how you change a water pump on a 2017 Jeep Wrangler JK with a 3.6. It's a sorry one from the factory, but we got a better Gates pump on there now. So I hope you all learned something, enjoy it. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.